Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Folks, can stimulus actually make things worse for the country? Well, folks, according to the Republican Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, he said that rising inflation as a result of all the stimulus is only going to make things worse. Here's the headline of an article on your screen from Fox Business. Rand Paul blames a 7% increase in consumer prices, which is a 40-year high, on excessive stimulus spending by Congress. In fact, Rand Paul released a new report that I'm showing you on your screen right now, The Hidden Tax: Inflation's Effect on American Families and Small Businesses. He released a new report and he talked about the troubling effects of inflation on low and middle income families as well as small businesses. He blames a 7% increase in consumer prices, which is a 40-year high, on excessive stimulus spending by Congress and warns that rising prices are only going to get worse. Here's what Senator Rand Paul said. In recent months, prices on nearly everything from gas, food and clothes to electricity, car prices and rent have all increased, and unfortunately, it's only going to get worse. He said, Congress needs to realize that further spending at this time of rapidly rising prices is only going to continue the trend of rising prices on the nation's already vulnerable businesses and families. Pretty incredible, folks. In fact, let's switch gears and go back to this document, The Hidden Tax. And again, this is from Rand Paul, and we'll provide you with a link to this document in the description section below. So here are the highlights from the document. COVID-19 stimulus is directly responsible for rising prices. Inflation disproportionately harms low and middle income families. In fact, here's a chart that shows you the inflation burden by household income. Families making less than $40,000, 71% of them suffer the effects of inflation, rising prices. Families making $40,000 to $99,000, 47%, and families making $100,000, a small minority, suffer the effects of inflation. Inflation disproportionately harms small businesses, according to Senator Rand Paul. And then the document goes on to talk about the current effects of inflation. In fact, let's take a look at chart 2, which shows you the cost of a tank of gas for the average American in December 2020 was $25.32. In December 2021 was $38. Pretty incredible if you think about it. And so this document, and again, I'll provide you with this document in the description section below. This document says the top 5 concerns for small business owners were: number 1, inflation; number 2, consumer spending; number 3, general operating expenses; number 4, supply chain disruptions; and number 5, taxes. Rand Paul talks about the causes of inflation, the effects of inflation, how it disproportionately impacts individuals who are poorer among us. He talks about individuals who are poorer having, I quote, a lack of real assets. And he said that low and middle income individuals are more exposed to the items that are most affected by inflation. For example, 3 items that contributed significantly to inflation were gas, used vehicles, and food. These items represent a much larger percentage of low and middle income household expenditures than high income expenditures, creating more strain on low and middle income households than their wealthy counterparts. He talks about inflation in small businesses. He said 82% of small businesses report raising prices, 11% raise their prices by 10%, 44% raise their prices by 15%, and 45% of small businesses raise prices by 20%. So he said, in conclusion, the government spending is leading to high inflation, and this is what Rand Paul writes. $4.9 trillion in COVID-19 stimulus spending has led to one of the highest and sustained levels of inflation in U.S. history. Though government stimulus spending was intended as a form of relief, and low and middle income Americans as well as small business owners were promised that their taxes would not increase as a result of these packages, Americans are now paying a hidden tax for these policies. This price of these measures is high to all, but low and middle income households and small business owners are responsible for a higher share than their wealthy counterparts. Further spending in this time of rapidly rising prices is to impose an even higher tax on the nation's already vulnerable small business owners and low and middle income families. In the words of Milton Friedman, there is no such thing as a free lunch. This is an 18-page report, folks. It's called The Hidden Tax, and it shines a spotlight on how prices on everyday essential goods have shot up in the past year, and this is citing many publicly available studies. And again, Rand Paul points out that households making $40,000 or less suffer the most hardship by rising costs, whereas households making $100,000 or more are not impacted much at all. He talks about the impact on businesses as well. Now, as you know, when the pandemic hit us, Congress did pass some massive relief packages, and then President Biden passed another package, and I believe that a lot of that was necessary at that time. But as far as Rand Rand Paul is concerned, he has been consistently critical of all the spending and he blames all this extra spending on the rising costs. In fact, Rand Paul wrote this in his report. While Congress was able to unite in 2020 in spending 4.9 trillion, unity does not always lead to virtuous outcomes. And this particular example of unity left Americans with the most difficult economic conditions in recent history. This crisis is one of our own making. Do you believe that too much spending, do you believe that all the stimulus has hurt our country? Folks, there is a direct relationship between all this money flushed through our economy and inflation. Folks, just to keep things simple, inflation is a direct result of an imbalance between supply and demand. As a direct result of all this extra money circulating in the economy, people want more goods, people want more products, people want more services. The problem is because of this pandemic, it's not that easy to get those goods, products and services because of disruptions in the supply chain. So what happens? Supply goes down, demand goes up. What happens when demand exceeds supply? Guess what? Things start to cost more because that is the law of nature. Supply and demand leads to price imbalances. So when you want something and that thing is not available, prices go up. Netflix just announced that they're raising prices. Well, that probably has to do with the fact that they're a company that needs to keep their bottom line high so that their share price can go up. But inflation is not just an imbalance between supply and demand. It is also companies taking advantage of opportunities to raise prices because they know the consumer has the ability to pay. So at the end of the day, when there is more stimulus, it is inevitable that there is more inflation. The big question right now is, can inflation be brought under control? But the bigger question, and that is the rationale behind this episode of Ignition Time, is, has all this stimulus money, has this excessive stimulus spending essentially backfired on us? Is it, to quote Rand Paul, a crisis that is one of our own making? And another big question is, are things actually going to get worse? Because Rand Paul believes that all this excessive spending led to rising inflation and things are going to get worse. Where do you stand with this? Do you agree or disagree with Rand Paul? I know he's a controversial figure, but do you think for once he has a point here? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Please click like, please click subscribe, please enable notifications. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.